Donkey Kong Country is today remembered as one of the seminal games of the 16-bit era. Released 20 years ago on the 21st of November for the Super Nintendo, it was born from Nintendo's desire to revive a dormant franchise. In an unprecedented move, they left development duties for this grand revival to British developer Rareware. The development process was tough, and at times the relations between Nintendo and Rare were uneasy. But through the culmination of great ideas and new technology, the end result was a platforming masterpiece. But just how did an up-and-coming development studio from Leicestershire end up developing one of Nintendo's landmark titles? The story goes that, in the summer of 1993, Tony Harmon, Product Acquisitions and Development Manager at Nintendo of America, was visiting development studios around the world to find potential partners for Nintendo. This search brought him to Rareware, who presented Harmon with a simple tech demo of a three-dimensional boxing game. Rareware had previously released games for the NES, under the name Ultimate Play the Game, as well as a few games for the Super Nintendo, including Battletoads. Using the considerable profits from these games, Rareware purchased technology from California-based Silicon Graphics, which allowed them to utilise a graphics technology known as Advanced Computer Modelling, or ACM. The acquisition of this technology placed Rareware as one of the most technologically advanced developers in the world, and led them to creating the aforementioned boxing game demo. The demo, in and of itself, was basic and unspectacular. Or at least would be, if not for the fact that it was running on the 16-bit Super Nintendo. For a system with the computational power of a budget mobile phone, that's greatest foray into 3D graphics was the migraine-inducingly chunky Star Fox, the graphics were unprecedented. Though Star Fox nonetheless remains a great achievement for the SNES, and its method of producing 3D graphics was very different to ACM, what Rareware had was unique and groundbreaking, and Nintendo saw an opportunity in it. The technology, which allowed for pre-rendered, three-dimensional, textured models to appear on screen as sprites, created the illusion of true 3D animation, of the sort that had never been seen before on a console. Impressed by this technology demonstrated in the demo, Harmon reported back to Nintendo, specifically to Genya Takeda, General Manager of Nintendo's Integrated Research Division. Takeda travelled to Japan, advising then President of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, on what Rareware had been doing. This led to discussions between Yamauchi and Rareware's founders, the Stamper Brothers. Nintendo wished for Rareware to utilise their advanced graphics technology on the Super Nintendo, as a way for Nintendo to gain an edge over the competition, and to extend the lifespan of the console while its successor, the N64, was in development. These talks resulted in Nintendo purchasing a 49% stake in the company, and thus Rareware became a second-party developer of Nintendo. Rareware's seemingly simple task was a culmination of theirs and Nintendo's desires, to make a game that made use of their graphics technology and incorporated the character of Donkey Kong. But in order for this game to really make a splash and to be recognised, it needed not only to look flashy, but to play well too. And, if you've played any of Rare's games from before the past decade, you'll know that they don't do half measures when it comes to gameplay. But in order to maintain a symbiotic relationship between the gameplay and the other design elements, Rare first needed to decide on what it was they would do with this guy. Donkey Kong, cultural icon that he was a fairly nondescript character. He was essentially just a big, angry ape that kidnapped women and got fought by Jumpman, aka Mario. The latter two aspects of his character were hardly attributes for a likeable protagonist, so Rare decided to confidently make full use of artistic license in reimagining the character of Donkey Kong. This ultimately led to a franchise and a game completely different to its predecessors. That Nintendo, a company famously protective and controlling of its intellectual properties, allowed Rareware to have pretty much complete creative control over the project, doing with Donkey Kong as they pleased, demonstrated a complete shift in normality for Nintendo, as well as a great degree of confidence in Rareware, one of their smartest decisions to date. Never before had Nintendo given such responsibility to a Western development studio. And while Rareware's uniqueness and originality is what made it famous, in many ways it worked in a very similar manner to Nintendo. Visionary management, technical finesse, projects and practices shrouded in secrecy, carefully scouted talent, and a deep understanding of video games and what made them great. Rareware's greatest attribute as a developer was arguably their astounding creativity and imagination, and they pumped this by the barrel load into their reimagining of Donkey Kong and his world. The game was to be a side-scrolling platformer, in order to best make use of the new technology and of Rareware's developing talents. With little interference from Nintendo, complete creative control from the minds of development visionaries, and under the watchful but nurturing eye of Tim Stamper, Rare, along with Mr. Miyamoto, created an all-new direction for Donkey Kong. He was given a charmingly cartoony, but palpably real and three-dimensional appearance, with all the weight and might of a real ape, and the charm of his now infamous red tie. Donkey Kong was reborn. Alongside him was an all-new accomplice, the equally charming and now equally famed Diddy Kong. A sidekick for DK had been in Rare's minds from very early on. Miyamoto initially willed that this sidekick be Donkey Kong Jr., but in typical Rareware fashion, this idea was met with defiance and a new character was designed. A small and limber chimpanzee, with a small stature, plenty of attitude, and a tiny red hat. Diddy was not only designed to look distinct, but to feel distinct, with a light and nimble playstyle that contrasted sharply with DK's slow and powerful one. The fact that these two completely different characters could be switched between at the push of a button demonstrated the versatility and polish of the game in its environments, and served to define Rareware's approach of inseparably tying graphics and gameplay. An important signifier that this game was to be more than a mere graphical showcase, and a trait that would define Rare's approach to development for many years to come. Once these central characters had been decided on, along with an extended family consisting of Cranky, Funky, and Candy, development began. It was decided that the game would be set on a tropical island, a perhaps more realistic and interesting environment for an ape than a construction site. But of course, thanks to the diversity and versatility of this setting, Rare were also able to include forest, cavern, mines, factory, and glacier settings, making full use of the game's incredible graphic fidelity, and allowing for a wide range of environments that would complement the game's excellent gameplay. But the development process wasn't all fun and, bananas. The game reportedly took a combined 22 man-years of work to make, the most of any game at the time, and Rare was struck by problems with technology whilst developing the game, with the powerful but slow Silicon Graphics workstations taking hours and sometimes days to fully render character models and objects. These machines, which Rare thankfully had in abundance due to Nintendo's growing relationship with SGI, drastically increased Rare's power usage, and ran at such high temperatures that they would have to be surrounded by fans on hot summer days. Luckily, Rare had assembled a brilliant team to develop the game regardless of these difficulties. Rare enforced strict regimentation, along with their now famed secrecy, in order to ensure each of the company's teams maintained a tight focus on their individual task. This allowed each member of the teams to build their own talents, and ensured there were always multiple innovations. It also created an environment of friendly competition, ensuring each team was always trying to outdo each other, and pushing quality levels to the max. Donkey Kong Country was largely developed by a team of about 16 people, tiny by the standards of today's AAA games, but large by Rare's, whilst ensuring that each member of the team got to make their own contributions and everyone's voice was heard, with bananas being decided on as a sort of Mario coin substitute and a result of the game's story, and elements such as wooden barrels being borrowed from the original arcade game. The game's villains, the reptilian Kremlings, were actually taken from a different game Rare was developing at the time. It was decided that these evil animals were a perfect fit for Rare's newly crafted Donkey Kong universe, and thus they were modified and inserted into the game as the henchmen of the evil King K. Rool. The detailed, realistic but charming nature of these crocodiles made full use of the game's SGI technology, and added yet another unique and memorable layer to the game. The soundtrack, meanwhile, was composed by David Wise. Wise, who had joined Rare in 1985 after impressing the Stamper Brothers with a demo of his at a local music store, had been Rare's sole in-house composer since the NES days. Tasked with creating a fittingly atmospheric soundtrack for Rare's groundbreaking game, he set about composing 3 short demo tracks to show to the Stampers. He initially thought that his soundtrack was likely to be replaced by one from one of Nintendo's in-house composers back in Japan, but the Stampers were so impressed by Wise's demos that they sent them off to Kyoto, and the rest is history. The demos were combined to create what is now one of gaming's most popular and iconic tracks, the DK Jungle Swing. better known as the soundtrack for the game's jungle hijinks level, as well as the 3 other jungle-themed levels following it. The track has since been used and remixed in every game featuring DK thereafter, and was just one of many similarly atmospheric tracks, and Wise's diverse and impressive repertoire. Each of the game's levels was governed by a distinct theme. A number of level themes or types were included in the game: jungle, underwater, cave, temple, treetop, and more. And each of these level types had its own set of gameplay rules, graphics, and yes, music, that would be implemented each time the level type was used across the game's 6 worlds. Wise composed distinct themes for each of these level types, incorporating a wide range of influences and melodies, and adding to the real, palpable sense of place and tone created by the game's detailed graphics. From the classical, atmospheric tones of aquatic ambience, to the frantic electronic beats of Fear Factory. The soundtrack pushed the Super Nintendo's sound chip to its absolute limit, with more layers of complexity and real, natural-sounding instruments than anything seen before on the console. Other tracks by Robin Beanland and Evelyn Fisher, the latter of whom would later go on to compose Donkey Kong Country 3, were also included in the game. Despite this tough development period, riddled with problems with advanced technology, pressure from Nintendo and Rare's management to deliver excellence, and technical restrictions of the Super Nintendo's hardware, Rare managed to deliver the completed game in just 18 months, an astonishingly short time considering the huge scale of development and the small size of the team. Finally, on November the 21st, 1994, 20 years ago, Donkey Kong Country was released to the public, and at that moment, all of Rare's hard work paid off. Donkey Kong Country was a huge success, both with critics and consumers, with praise being directed at its advanced graphics, beautiful soundtrack, and extremely fun and polished gameplay. Even in an uncertain market of the beckoning might of Sony's 32-bit behemoth, the PlayStation, and tough competition from Sega, Donkey Kong Country managed to revitalise sales of the Super Nintendo, revive a dormant franchise, and shift millions of units in its first few months, becoming the best-selling game of 1994, and eventually going on to shift 9 million copies and earn its place as the Super Nintendo's second best-selling game. It garnered universal critical acclaim, earning review scores of 9.25 out of 10, 4.5 out of 5, and 31 out of 40, from EGM, Nintendo Power, and Famitsu respectively, and winning multiple awards, including CES's Best Graphic Achievement and EGM's Game of the Year. Its immense success not only propelled Nintendo back towards glory for the remainder of the Super Nintendo's lifespan, but solidified Rare's position as Nintendo's most important second-party developer, earning them a new, bigger development house, and making them Nintendo's key development partner with the N64. Its legacy and impact can be felt on games to this day, with the Donkey Kong franchise continuing to be one of Nintendo's most popular and recognisable, and the people who worked on the game going on to work on many other popular projects and gaining universal reverence and success. And 20 years on, after all the hubbub surrounding the graphics has faded away, the gameplay still stands up firmly, and the game retains its position as one of the Super Nintendo's best. Soon after its release, a sequel began development, but that's a story for another video. Thank you for watching this history of Donkey Kong Country. Don't forget to like the video and drop a comment with your memories of the game. If you want more Donkey Kong and Nintendo content, be sure to subscribe to my channel as there's lots more coming. For now, my name has been Dr. Cactus, and thanks for watching.